Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Can you please change this slide? Well, first we're going to introduce you Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was a writer, a novelist, and also a journalist. He was born in 1812, and well, he wasn't always a writer. He began working in a factory, in a shoe factory. So during those times, he could get experience so as to write his books and stories later. Well, his literary popularity began with the Pickwick Papers. He didn't write books. He used to publish each chapter of his books in newspapers or tabloids. It was called a serial publication, basically. And so yeah, later when the story was done, he then published the book, the formal book of the stories. So yeah, the Pickwick Papers was the first serial publication that he published. Unfortunately, he died in 1870. He had a cardiovascular stroke, but he ended being the most popular writer in the world, not only in England. So yes. Dickens' style. Well, he used to mix realism with fantasy also, because he used to compare the characters of his books with things. For example, in the case of Oliver Twist, he compared Oliver Twist with furniture or socks, with people from the aristocracy with refrigerators and machines and things like that. He obviously, regarding his nature as a writer, he had a great linguistic creativity, and he used to use satire very often against the aristocracy. Basically, his books are related with how aristocracy, or poor people are related with aristocracy. How those two worlds collide. Well, obviously, the most important thing, the two most important things of Dickens' literature is that he used to name his characters with funny names, with arresting names, as it is said there, names that would, express how the character is. Later on, I'm going to explain you. And also, what is really important and special about Dickens' stories is that he used to put illustrations on his books, or in this case, on the serial publications, because as you may know, newspapers needs also an image to support the information. So he did that with his stories too. He used to put images, and he had meetings with the illustrators so as to represent purely how the scene was going to be. So yes. Now, okay. No, Jose.
Let's talk about a little bit the context in general. We had in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, right? Most of you may know about this and about the increasing revolution of machinery, about new technology, about for example, mortality was reduced to some extent, well, in a greater sense. Most of these aspects were considered during the working period of this literary work, because in many aspects it was used as metaphors to describe certain characters or describe certain aspects of this part of the society, and it was important in that sense. As you may see, it brought several consequences. that will be discussed, for example, the image of childhood during that period, or the overpopulation or poverty. But let's talk about a little bit of public education. In that regard, we can see that public education was in charge of mostly what was a responsibility of the church in general. We have several institutions that were managed by the church. Well, Dickens was an Anglican member of this church, but it did little to prevent from criticism, because we can see that the hardship that Oliver went throughout the story, right? Because it's a sad story, and mostly we can see some kind of attempt to express a certain reality that is not good for Oliver, and that's a reality for all children. So it leads to the point of childhood. It meant throughout that period that childhood was part of the working class. I mean, for being a child, like, I don't know, from 6 years, 7 years at most, you would be able to work. So you can see that back then at least, it was a reality that nowadays is prohibited, right? A child cannot work at all. It's not possible. But it is still happening, right? Let's talk about our population. Well, another consequence of Industrial Revolution: better standards of life, better opportunity. That's right, opportunities. It brought many jobs for people, for poor people especially. That, well, in this case, these jobs were not that good at that moment, because the wage of those jobs were really low. And yeah, and that leads us to poverty, which was the most of the important things in this book, because we can see that an orphan, lonely child who suffered from poverty and from the real bad behavior that people had during that time, because of that, because of crime increased, because of poverty, because of injustice. So mainly, that's the reality that we are involved in throughout this book. So that's it. Could you change it?
I would like to add one short comment about these two last aspects of the Victorian society. The overpopulation was caused by many people moving in from the countryside to work in the cities, which also led to poverty, and there weren't really any available houses or apartments to actually house people. So these led to the creation of workhouses, which were administered by the church, and as charity they allowed people and orphans and a lot of people in general to live there. But the conditions were very poor, up to 30 people living in one room. So, and also the workhouses are the main context of Oliver Twist, which is important for this book. Oh! Alright everyone, buckle your seatbelts because this is going to be a very long journey. It is a very long book. Yes it is.
I'm going to take a seat.
Yeah, so I need something to help my memory. So it turns out Oliver Twist, as we all know, is an orphan. He was born in a specified time during Victoria, around 1830. He was born in a parish house, and he, as many people, orphans didn't survive really well, he was sent to be farmed, which means that he was sent to a house in which a lady was taking care of many orphans, and they were offered jobs, and they were raised by that lady. Sadly, the working conditions and the living conditions in those farming houses weren't really good. So many children starved to death or died from cold or diseases. So then, let me see. When he reaches the age of 8 or 9 years old, he is sent to a workhouse, which is like the center of his childhood. In this workhouse, he doesn't fare much better. He also is starved to death along with many other orphans, and he's also mistreated by the adults who run the workhouse, who was also administered by the church. One day, they offered this child, Oliver Twist, for £5. They would pay anybody £5 who would take him as an apprentice. So an undertaker comes and takes Oliver to the funerary house, and he is also very mistreated there. He's abused. He's emotionally abused as well, because he's forced to go to funerals to see dead people, and he often sleeps under a counter in the store, and he's also not fed much food. One time there comes this boy called Noah, which was also a parish child, and he was jealous of Oliver. So he starts mocking him, and Oliver decides to act on it. So he jumps on in and starts hitting him, and well, this whole chaos. And then the adults that ran the place come and start hitting him for hitting the other child. And after this injustice, he decides to leave, and he leaves for London. London was like 70 miles away from the city in which Oliver lived. So he, with only an extra shirt, a pair of socks, and one loaf of bread, decides to start walking 70 miles towards London. On the way to London, he meets an old friend at the farmhouse in which he grew up, and he wishes good luck to him. So Oliver keeps going to London, walking for about a week with nothing more than a loaf of bread and a penny, which he spent to buy another loaf of bread. And then he arrives in London, and he meets this boy who we will call the Artful Dodger. So he offers him food, he invites him to eat, and he's also offered a place to stay. The Artful Dodger tells Oliver that he has a good place to stay in the hands of a good gentleman, and he's led to this house that is run by this man who actually trains kids to steal for him. Oliver is very innocent, so he doesn't find out about what they are doing until he sees them in public. He was held in that house for about a month. He wasn't allowed to leave, so he endured this mistreatment throughout his entire life. One day, he's told to go with the other kids to steal. He's taught how to pick pockets, how to steal without people noticing, and they go and steal this distinguished man's handkerchief. The Dodger actually pulls out the handkerchief from this person and starts running away. But Oliver was shocked at what he did and was just standing there. And the man whose handkerchief was pickpocketed notices that someone stole his handkerchief, and the first person he sees is Oliver. So Oliver starts running away. Among the people who were in town at the time, everybody starts following Oliver, and they are yelling, "Stop, thief!" And they are running to catch Oliver. So the man, once they catch Oliver, the man comes to the front of everyone and starts feeling sorry for Oliver. But he's taken into court, he's arrested, and he's trying, the police officer who was there, who was in charge of taking Oliver's testimony, actually made everything up. Everything Oliver told him, he completely changed it, and he was made to look guilty. But then a witness who watched the whole thing tells everyone that Oliver is innocent, and the man whose handkerchief was stolen decides to bring Oliver to his place. Oliver during the trial actually fainted because he was very weak. So he's taken to this man's house, and he starts treating Oliver very gently. He has servants that give him medicines, that treat him very well. They feed him, and he's actually very grateful for everything they are doing for him. Oliver starts to recover and notices that in his room there is a portrait of a lady who seems very familiar to him. So actually the man who adopted him, Mr. Brownlow, tells him that he also notices this resemblance, and Oliver faints. Everyone seems very keen on fainting in this story. Actually, Mr. Brownlow removes the portrait from the room, because it gets Oliver all worked up. So, let me see. By the time Oliver gets better, he's sent to return a bunch of books that weren't really asked for. They got an order of books, and many of them hadn't been asked for. So Mr. Brownlow sends Oliver to return them. He gives him £5, which was a lot of money at the time, enough to pay rent, to go return the books because they weren't needed. And he trusts Oliver to come back after delivering the books. But in the way to the bookstore, he is kidnapped by Fagin, by Bill Sykes, and Nancy, who were all associated with this child thievery business. So they kidnap him and they lock him up, and they make him go and help everyone in a burglary in a house. So they force him to go to that house, and he was needed because there was a hole that only he could go through because it was very small. And in the process, he gets noticed. The people in the house notice they are being robbed. So there come the guards and everyone, and somebody shoots Oliver. So Oliver is left in a very bad state. Everyone runs away, and Sykes, who was in charge of Oliver, and he's also a very abusive and violent man, he stops to rest at a ditch and ditches Oliver. And then he leaves him bleeding out in a ditch, and he runs away to God knows where. So Oliver, after he wakes up, he realizes he's in a lot of pain. He was shot in the arm. So he comes back to this house, and everyone starts asking, where did this boy come from? Why is he here? Why is he shot? So everyone starts wondering, and they say that he was part of the whole group of robbers that were in the house that day. But everyone starts doubting, so nobody actually really knows about Oliver. So they start treating him very well again. They make him heal, and everyone treats him very nicely again, because they were of high society. After Oliver has healed, he starts working for those people, and it's pretty much his family. So once he heals again, he decides to go visit Mr. Brownlow, the man who had treated him very well in the past. But Mr. Brownlow had actually traveled to the West Indies looking for something. So after the robbery, Nancy, who was Bill Sykes' girlfriend, overhears Monks, who was another man, a very mysterious man that ran the whole operation. Actually, all these people were working under Monks' authority, and Monks meets with Fagin to talk about a very important business. It turns out that they had proof of Oliver's identity, but they threw it away. And Nancy overhears this and goes to the house in which Oliver lives to talk to a specific lady about the whole thing. And Bill Sykes finds out about this and kills her because of her betrayal. So after he kills her, he starts wandering around town, not knowing what to do. And he is actually discovered, the people discovered that he killed Nancy, so he starts being prosecuted by everyone. And when trying to escape with a rope, he actually manages to hang himself by accident. So he kills himself. And yeah, he wanted to rappel down a wall. So he makes a sort of loop, but he slips. So he didn't go to the physical thing. Everyone, the whole operation starts unfolding. Everyone starts discovering what was going on in this house. So everyone starts getting arrested. And when Mr. Brownlow comes back, we actually find out that he was looking for Monks. Monks was actually Oliver's older brother. And we know that Oliver was actually not that, Oliver's family was not that poor. Sadly, Oliver's parents, his mother died when he was born, and his mother was the legitimate girlfriend of his father, who was also married at the time. So Monks is the child of the whole marriage between Oliver's dad and Monks' mother, but he had an illegitimate girlfriend who he was not allowed to marry. So they confront Monks about everything, and everyone, the whole story unfolds, and we discover the whole truth about Oliver's past, and everyone gets arrested, and Oliver is adopted by Mr. Brownlow, and he lives happily ever after. It's a very complicated book. So, in this story, you may not have noticed because of how condensed everything was. We have a lot of things. We have the church, which runs actually the whole workhouse system and orphanages and everything. And actually Dickens was very critical of the church, even though he was an Anglican himself. In this book, he criticizes the way the church doesn't really try to improve poor people's lives. They do pretty much nothing in their favor. And they actually think people are sort of ungrateful for asking for more food. For example, there's a very famous scene in which Oliver asks for more food and he's locked up in a room for 1 week. And he was not allowed to socialize and everything. Poverty also is a very important thing in this story because everyone who was sort of a criminal was poor. And Oliver moved around this environment in the story. And he's a victim of what other people do. We have crime as well. Well, I think it's pretty obvious. He was part of a gang of burglars and pickpockets and everything. And child labor. Children in general, especially orphans, weren't really human at the time. They were like objects, they were mistreated. The state or the church didn't really spend much money on them. So they were forced to work because there weren't really any laws that protected children. And this is a very important aspect of the story because everyone, especially Fagin and his gang, is trying to corrupt Oliver. Oliver is a very innocent boy. He doesn't know evil. He believes people are playing games until he actually sees people stealing. So everyone tries to corrupt Oliver to become a pickpocket. But Oliver is so innocent that he's pure feeling. No reason, no evil. He just feels and he's just beaten around by everyone. But he's not corrupted in the end.
I would like to add another interesting fact about child labor. And there was a bill about the protection of animals that was enacted before the other bill protecting the child from working. It actually was enacted at the beginning of this 19th century. And the other one at the end, the protection of children. That's the interesting thing.
Animals were more important than children at
Yeah.
that time.
We would like to think that this book changed the vision towards childhood and animals in general.
Let's talk about the characters, since we have seen the summary of this story, right? We have Oliver, right? This orphan child that suffered throughout the whole story, and finally turned out to be not a poor child. Then we have Mr. Bumble, a master of this parish school. We have Mr. Bumble. And then we have Mr. Sowerberry, an undertaker.
This is the Undertaker.
Another master of Oliver Twist. Then we have the Artful Dodger. As you may see, he was actually one of these Fagan's apprentice, right? Well, he was quite skillful at his job, and actually it gives an idea of how Oliver could ended up at the end if he wasn't that.
He's the same
innocent
age as Oliver.
Yes.
Around 9 years old.
Yeah.
But he's much more skilled in the act of stealing handkerchiefs.
And then we have Fagin, the master of these kids. That, well, he had a partner who was Bill Sykes, who is also an important character since he's the real villain. He's really cruel and bad at anyone who tried to collaborate with Oliver.
And he was evil and violent.
He was evil, really evil. And then we had Nancy, someone who turned out to be a good person. She was part of these children of pagans. I mean, she was really one of them. She was a prostitute. Well, it wasn't said, but she was a prostitute.
She's 17 years old.
Yes. And finally, Monks, who is this half brother of Oliver.
And he ran the whole operation from the bottom.
Yeah, and all for money, because of the will that was left for Oliver.
Yeah, Nancy is the real character who redeems herself because she actually collaborates to uncover the secret about Monks and Oliver's family. So she actually feels guilty about Oliver. She always liked Oliver, and she doesn't like the way everyone is treating him. So she decides to tell the secret she overheard to the family who's taking care of Oliver. And because of this, she is killed by Bill Sykes.
Yeah, and most of the characters were like unidimensional to some extent, because we have the bad guy, we have the really bad guy, and then we have, actually it's not that scripted in that sense, it's just throughout most of them. There are characters like Nancy, who at the end redeems herself, but mostly we have unidimensional characters.
Oliver Twist, the whole story isn't really centered, it is centered around Oliver Twist, but he doesn't participate much in the story. It's more about the way the world interacts with him and what happens around him because of his status of being an orphan. So,
Are you going to add something? Okay. Now the symbols to finish this. Well, characters' names. I told you before that characters' names are the most important thing in Dickens literature. Characters' names are a symbol by itself because, as I told you before, their names used to characterize them. Make a hyperbole of the characteristics of each character. Sorry for the redundancy. For example, Oliver is called Oliver Twist because of his twisted life. Because he didn't belong anywhere. Because according to him, everybody hated him.
and because of his faith, because we are made to believe that he's going to be an orphan forever, and in the end he has this twist that makes him actually very rich.
Thank you. Next we have, and also the Artful Dodger, for example, as, I don't know which of you mentioned that he was, he was a bowler, he life as an artful,
Job.
Yes, like an artful job. Or Mr. Bumble, that he was like an authority, but he had a bumbling authority. He was kind of silly. So yes, next we have Bullseye. Bullseye is Bill Sykes' dog. As Leon and Jose mentioned, Bill Sykes killed Nancy because of her betrayal. But Bullseye, he was in the crime scene. As you know, it was all covered in blood. And Bullseye, stepped on the blood. And basically, that's why people knew that he killed Nancy, because the dog
started following everywhere.
Yes, and also Bill Sykes, wandered everywhere, so as to find Bull's eyes, also to kill him, but he couldn't find him anywhere. So as his guilt,
And he's also very mistreated by Sykes. The dog is said to be scarred and have a lot of wounds and to be very shaggy, which means he didn't wash very often.
like Bull's eye was like Bill Sykes' alter ego.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense.
The whole, it was the evidence of the personality of Bill Sykes.
Yeah. And finally, we have the London Bridge. That London Bridge basically was the connection between the aristocracy and the poverty. And Nancy meets with Mr. Bumble and also with Rose. Also, so as to tell them about Oliver Twist. So the London Bridge is, it's the most important symbol of this story. And also Nancy by herself, because because of her, Oliver finally finds a home, finds a family, and he lived happy ever after. So yes, those are the symbols. And those are the references.
Yes.
So,
It's time for the presentation.
yeah.
Everything, what we've all been waiting for.
Oh, I have taken the measure of the two women that died last night, Mr. Bumble.
I say you'll make your fortune, Mrs. Sowerberry. I say you'll make your fortune.
Oh, you think so? The prices allowed by the board are rather small.
Well, so are the coffins.
Oh, well, Mr. Bumble. The coffins are something narrower and more shallow than they used to be. But we must have some profits. The well-seasoned timber is an expensive article, sir. And all the iron handles come by canal from Birmingham.
Well, every trade has its drawbacks.
Oh, of course.
A reasonable profit is of course allowable.
Of course, Mr. Bumble. And if I had to make it up on that particular article, I will make it in the long run, you see.
Just so.
Though I must say, Mr. Bumble, that I have to contend against one very great disadvantage, which is that all the staff people go off the quickest. The people who have been better off and have paid rates for many years are the first to sink when you come to the house. Let me tell you, Mr. Bumble, 4 3 inches over one's calculation makes it a great hole in one's pockets. And especially when one has a family to provide for, sir.
By the by, don't you happen to know of anybody who would want a boy, do you? Parochial apprentice who's at the moment burdened. Millstone, as I may say, round the parochial throat. Liberal terms, Mrs. Sowerberry. Liberal terms.
Good, so that's just the very thing I wanted to speak to you about. You know, dear me, what a very elegant button this is, Mr. Bumble. I never noticed it before.
Well, yes, I think it rather pretty. The die in it is the same as a parochial seal. The Good Samaritan, the Good Samaritan healing the sick and bruised man. The board presented it to me on New Year's morning, and I put it on for the first time, I remember, when I attended the inquest of this deceased tradesman who died in a doorway at midnight.
I recollect that you brought it in. Died from exposure to the cold and the want of common necessaries of life, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they made it a special verdict, I think, by adding some words to the effect. And that if the fifth of relieving officer...
Tosh! Foolery! If the board paid attention to everything jurymen talk, they'd have enough to do.
Yes, indeed.
Juries is uneducated, vulgar, groveling wretches. I despise them.
Oh, so do I, Mr.
If I only wish that we had a jury of the independent kind for a week or two in the house. The rules and regulations of the board would soon bring the spirit down for them.
Oh, let them alone for that.
So, what about the boy?
Oh, why, you know, Mr. Bamboo, I have paid a good deal for persuades.
Hmm? Well,
I was thinking that if I pay so much towards them, I could get as much out of them as I can. And facing these facts, I'll take the board myself.
well, I will discuss the matter with the board if that's alright with you. Is it okay if I deliver the boy later today? I'm sure the board would be alright with leaving a boy like Oliver in your hands, but you must be very busy given the way things have been going lately.
No problem at all, mister. And you're right, I'm very busy right now. So I will do right in the meeting this time. So it's been a pleasure.
It sure has. Oliver, pull the cap off your face and stand straight, would you? Well, of all the most ungratefullest and evil-willed boys that I've ever known, you have to be the worst. So what?
So lonely. I'm so lonely. Everybody hates me. And it feels like I've been cut here and it's all bleeding out.
This troublesome cock. Alright. Stand up. And be a good boy. We'll get dry off the tears.
Okay.
Come on.
The end. So, yes, I don't know if you have any questions. Whatever.
Comments?
of my British, quote unquote British accent because I'm not used to it, but I tried.
I have a comment. I really like the story. Well, I knew the story of Oliver Twist, but not in that way. I like the way in which Dickens portrayed these injustices from that period of history. Well, everything you mentioned, poverty, and making child working in factories, and everything. So, yes, I find it very interesting the book, and also the way you performed was very awesome. I really liked it, and I like my friends.
Thank you.